Besher, and I chair the Arizona Parent Family Coalition, which is part of this production. So I want to welcome everyone. And I would especially like to welcome our speaker, Dawn McReynolds. I've known Dawn for probably 15, 20 years, Dawn. And my life has been definitely impacted by our friendship. And she is a person that is a peer and has role modeled recovery for our community. And so there you are. Welcome, Dawn. And she is now a budding silversmith.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about mental illness, but from a from a different perspective than we normally talk. I'm going to be sharing my personal experience and how, when I'm sick, how that progresses through and impacts those that are in my family and my friend group. And Caroline's going to be helping me share my screen. So let me I'm not sure how I got here. So I'm going to just try without hanging up. There we go. So Caroline, go ahead down to screen slide number 4 for me. And just so everybody knows, you could see me, but I'm not going to be able to see you. So if there are questions or something else that we need to pause for, Lori or Kathy will let me know. I think. Am I right, Lori?
Yes.
Okay.
I had to come off mute. Yeah, we'll wait until after your presentation to take questions, but Kathy and I will monitor the chat for you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to start with talking about everyday thoughts and battles. And I feel sometimes with my diagnosis, just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the inner city of Detroit, and violence was really part of everything I saw that was around me as I was coming up out of my home and in my home. And so today, after years and years of therapy, anxiety that swings back and forth into depression and overzealous thinking, I kind of battle myself for control over thoughts. And most often, those thoughts consume me in a negative way. So, um, I could be fine, and then somebody gives me a certain look, or I hear somebody said something in a negative way about me, or assumed something negatively about me, and I begin to struggle with how I'm feeling and how I'm navigating that. And the battle can actually leave me emotionally drained. Living with mental illness often means that my battle, really occurs between me and myself more than it occurs between me and anybody else. And I think that's one thing that a lot of our families and friends don't realize, that, we're battling this process and we're doing it within ourselves. And oftentimes we project that battle onto others. And it could be a simple look or a correction or a critique, or, somebody bumping into you or being rude. And it's just like, how could you treat me this way? And the whole world, blows up because of it. So, today we're going to be talking about all of those things, and how we, as individuals, when we're sick, how can we really support ourselves and not impact those that are there for us so much, and that kind of help us walk through those negative times. So I've often heard people say, when I don't feel well, everybody else makes me feel overwhelmed. Everything. They always want this, or they're telling me to do this, or saying I should think this way or feel this way. And for me, when that happens, I start feeling like I'm drowning in emotions. And it's hard for me to articulate those emotions in the moment. And Kathy will tell you, I work very hard to be a speaker and articulate myself well. But when these times are happening, oftentimes what people see and hear is anger, frustration, arguing. And what I think they're hearing is, please help me. Please be patient with me. So you could see the dichotomy. It's like, I think I'm projecting, this or saying that, but what others are hearing and seeing is completely different. So keep in mind, when we're sick, we can't really see ourselves clearly as if we were looking into a mirror and going, oh, that's what I look like, or oh, that's what I sound like. We're not actually able to do that as well as we think we are. So, Caroline, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and go to that next slide. And can somebody let me know when she's there? Like I said, I can't see the meeting. So,
She's there.
okay, thanks. So, when we're talking about our feelings, one of my trips that I always went on is the whole world is wacky. Like, what is going on? Nobody was really understanding me. Nobody's hearing me. I never really paused and thought, how am I experiencing my feelings and my thoughts? But that's crucial. It's crucial for individuals who are managing their mental health. It's crucial that we step back and think, okay, wait, there's an emotional shift that just occurred. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? See, the mental illness is insidious. It's a disease that tricks our minds, and it can take you through a gamut of thinking and feeling and acting before we even realize what's happening. Most often when we're sick, our fingers are always pointed outward. I didn't get this done because blah, 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 blah. I didn't understand that because you weren't clear. Am upset because of your tone. And so we cannot necessarily always see, hey, it's me. I'm not myself. My core personality has changed because I don't feel well. Something's wrong. My chemistry's off. I didn't take my medication this week. I got into an argument. I feel like people let me down, whatever the situation is. And so, one of the things that happens to me when I'm not feeling well, the very first thing is I start becoming uncomfortable in my own skin with people that are around me. And I start listening to what they're saying and I interpret what they're saying. So I'm like a perfect mind reader when I'm sick because I just know what they're meaning and what they're really trying to say. And so I start reading way too much into what their actions are, a roll of the eyes, a shrug of the shoulder, an angry look. And by the way, I have what, a lot of my trainers have called the perfect 11, which is I'm a thinker. People think I'm mad all the time. I am mad, but not all the time. Anyway, when I'm sick, my emotions take over. And it's hard for me to shift from listening to my emotions and thinking I'm a mind reader and watching people's facial expression and body language and going, okay, this is my perception and I can't trust myself right now. If you've ever noticed, and if you're a family member or a friend or even an individual that's been in real mental health recovery for a while, you know when you've shifted, and you know that you're pointing the finger at everyone else except yourself. And so, again, today is about exploring the truth about distorted perceptions and really self-awareness. I mean, I know a lot of people who talk about being in mental health recovery and, hey, it's not my thing to judge, but I can tell you that just like me, when I'm not well, my recovery goes out the window. It's just that we don't know it's out the window. We're the first ones to be like, I'm good, you're wrong. So, let's talk about our sensitivities to others more. Let's talk about our emotional responses more. We could talk about diagnosis, we can advocate all day long, all year long, all, decade long about getting the right kind of help. But until we start talking about the truth, as individuals who walk through this, until we start understanding there's a cognitive interplay that goes on in the brain when we're not well, and it's our responsibility to be more self-aware of how we feel, what we're saying, and who we're saying it to. Until we do all that, we're not really exercising our ability to be in recovery. Can you go to slide 6, please, Caroline? And thank you so much for your help today. I really appreciate you stepping in.
She's there.
Okay. So I think one of the hardest things for me was changing my worldview. See, when I was coming up in Detroit, and I mean, when I say Detroit, I mean the real Detroit, the inner city of Detroit. I've met people that would be like, yeah, I'm from Detroit. Oh, really? Oh, somewhere up here in Michigan, northern Arizona, or northern Michigan. That's not really Detroit. But coming up in Detroit, everybody was angry. Right? Everybody was fighting. Everybody was, it was very physical, very violent. And so I didn't have kind of a point of view where my responses were harsh or my responses were inappropriate. And so it wasn't until I came here, I think, I can't remember what year it was, and really started kind of getting help and ended up in the hospital with a breakdown and realizing that I needed a lot of support and I needed help in looking at my perception or understanding how.
I'm sorry. It's okay. Is it good?
I'm hearing a lot of talking. Is somebody asking something?
I muted them.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So it wasn't until I realized, and this was years later, and it took me a while to realize that mental health will alter your worldview. Whether you're a member that's experiencing it or an individual that loves someone who has been struggling with mental illness, or you're a friend, a child, a parent. So mental illness for me sometimes affects my everyday interactions. Everything from a rude waitress to calling a bill company and having no flexibility because I'm short this month, or feeling like somebody really acts like a friend but they're really not. They have negative things to say behind your back, or just an overall deceptively negative worldview. It's little things like I've mentioned that we all face every day. Just because we're human can suddenly feel really big and can feel very personal. And, what happens over time is as you're navigating not being well, and even with medication, you still sometimes swing into that unwell, place, is that you really feel everybody else is behaving strangely. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Is it a full moon today?" Like, what is going on? Sometimes it is, and sometimes, the whole world is off. But sometimes we need to look within ourselves and ask ourselves, is this real? Or is my perception distorted right now? It If we don't pause ourselves and take accountability for our mental health walk, we will mistrust those that are the closest to us. And sometimes I got to be honest with you, sometimes some people, you need to kind of keep like, whoa, when you hear somebody else talking about everybody else, be mindful, that's a character flaw. Don't forget and then get mad when they're telling everybody else everything about you. That was my biggest thing. And so that's why I brought it up. But one of the things that we have to do as people is understand, okay, what are my relationships today? I have trusted relationships today. I know there's people that are in my corner. And I know that if everyone else is feeling weird or acting strange, then I know it's time for me to say, okay, what's going on with me? Is it because, and fill in that blank. Remember, I said fill in the blank. Is it everyone else? Or do I have a role in that? Is that where I can then seek clarity and support? And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard habit to get into. And sometimes it's the loneliest walk. Next slide, please. Because what ends up happening when you start pausing and you start saying, hold on, is this me? Or is this, the disease that I have? And
Whose
let's keep
slide?
in mind, oh, she's on it. I think she's on it. It's the loneliest
On,
walk,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. So sometimes what happens is I suddenly, am aware that people don't think that the disease that I have is equivalent to, let's say, diabetes or heart disease. Somehow, in some people's mind, mental illness is different. And I'm going to tell you how it's different. It's different because we act differently than we normally are, and we don't know it. And so people are like, oh boy, they're not doing well today. I'm just not going to engage. Hey, when symptoms take over, I isolate. Because I've had enough of that reaction from my friend group or my family that when everybody's kind of reacting like that, I pull away. I get scared that I'm going to do something or say something and make someone mad, and it's going to make it worse. And I don't know what to do. And so I really want to talk about what I'm going through at that moment. But I worry, one, is this going to make me look weak? Will they lose respect for me? Or are they going to do the worst thing that they could ever do and start telling me what I have to do to fix me? Which is the worst thing. Other times I go way to the other end of the spectrum. And I don't care if this person has talked about me since the day I was born. I'll share everything I'm going through currently. And I'm just screaming out, somebody understand. Somebody make me feel that you're warm and kind and that you love me. Even if it's not true, just make me feel that way and I'll feel better. And it comes off as insecurity. When my real issue isn't that I'm insecure, it's that my mind is betraying me and I'm unsure how to share that. I don't know. And so when those things happen, and this part of my journey is one of the hardest, it shows me how important it is to really have those safe spaces and kind people who understand, who aren't judging, who are saying, okay, I get that, I understand, but Dawn, part of your thing is being able to see yourself. Remember, you said, remind me to look in my mirror. Remind me it's not always everybody else. Remind me that I'm just as accountable as I want to hold somebody else. But that internal conflict, it really takes an emotional toll. And it drives me to try to be quiet or be very loud. Don't call someone else and say, I'm feeling stupid, or worse, I feel different from everybody else. I don't trust anyone. I can't put myself down. Or, you said this last week. You did this last week. Why are you talking like that? You. Internally, I'm yelling out, me, help. Externally, you. It's a conflict. And when that conflict arises, that's when we say to ourselves, it feels like the whole world is against me. But I know this one person, and even if they're not perfect, even if we've had issues in the past, I know they'll be honest with me. I trust that because when I'm feeling fine or not feeling fine, they're the same. They're always the same. Next slide, please.
It's there.
Thank you. Sometimes I feel like I'm just gonna, and I've already ripped open my chest. Heck, why not? Let's just keep going. Sometimes I feel like those that care about me are cold or distant. I even know when deep down they're really not, but my anxiety and my depression twist how I see them. I suddenly feel like, they're not communicating enough. They're not warm enough. Or why didn't they answer my 6 calls that I placed? Today, I've learned how to say, okay, wait a minute, Dawn. Is this really true? Sometimes it is. But most of the time it's not. If I'm reaching out to somebody, I trust them. Talking to someone I trust has helped me see the real deal. It's helped me understand, okay, this is my mind playing tricks on me, or no, it ain't. That girl, I know. This is what really happened. See, this is the thing. Sometimes we think our experiences, if we're honest with them, they'll disqualify us when we're actually having authentic experiences from people, or people won't believe us because, we've had this mental illness, situation that came up and we were, not being ourselves. But that's a difference. It's who is in your life. How have you built that relationship? Because when I say something today, and those that know me and trust me and know I'm good, know I'm not going through, a situation where I'm not feeling well, when I speak out of truth, they listen. What I'm trying to do is reflect to you all the discrepancy about knowing who really cares and the feeling or the thoughts that are lies when I'm not feeling well. Okay, people are cold and rude to me all the time. When does it bother me? It bothers me when I'm sick. Things become distorted when I'm sick. I can't see myself and how I'm responding when I'm sick. It's called cognitive distortion. And it can happen to anyone, whether you have a mental illness diagnosis or not. Has anybody ever been in the hospital and been told, or saw somebody they love being told they had a severe disease, and they get out and at first they're doing okay and they're really working on helping themselves, and then 6 months later they're not doing anything they should be doing, and they're like, hey, I didn't hear it was that serious, or I am on my path, and they're not. Okay, we distort things all the time. It's the human condition. But what happens when we allow that condition to dictate how we feel is when we get in trouble. When somebody says, wow, that person was really rude. Or we might say when somebody responds to somebody else, wow, that was intense, but great at the same time. Do we know what those responses are doing to our friend that may be struggling with other life issues? Do we know what our reactions to them are saying? Do we know when somebody's upset and not really talking about what's going on because they're scared? Every single time I have an episode of anxiety or depression, my thinking becomes distorted. And I have to pull away because people say things and I hear them a certain way, or they say them the way that I heard them, and it's still not good. I have to step back and think, why am I feeling this? There's somebody I know, her name is Susan Kennard. She's at Access. And one of the things I admire her for so many things, but one of the things I admire the most about her is she has this innate ability to pause and think before she speaks or acts. And I've often said to her, how do you do that? Teach me that. And it's a work in progress. Y'all know, everybody that knows me knows I don't have that perfected, but I want to. But when I am struggling, one thing that I have learned is I can see myself today and I can hear others' true intent today more than I could 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm still working on it. But it doesn't let people off the hook. It doesn't let me off the hook that I've been able to pause a little bit and realize that my, internal process is distorted. What it does do is it helps me understand every step of the way that the mirror I'm looking in might be broken. Next slide, please. I don't see myself clearly. I might blame others, especially my family and my closest friends, or even my closest coworkers. But this isn't their burden to carry. See, they carry it and they will continue to carry it out of love and concern and dedication for you. But it's really not their burden. And how do we ease that? Over time, therapy, medication. But the biggest key is responsibility, taking responsibility. What is really happening? I have to care for myself today more than I ever have had to. I have to pause myself more than I've ever had to in my own thinking. I've had to learn when to trust what I'm feeling in my body and follow that feeling to a conclusion more than I ever had to today. Today, I can see the difference. Even from 3 months ago to today, I could see the difference in feeling slower, being calmer. Sometimes we are faced with what seems like insurmountable circumstances. Some people will try to be there for you. Some people will pour out their hearts to you and appreciate every single one of those people and love them. But overall, it's you who has to take the bull by the horns. And it's you that has to say, okay, self, what am I doing today? What is this negative thinking? Am I magnifying this, or is this really what I think it is? And if you don't know and you can't tell, if your mirror breaks as easy and often as mine does, find someone who you trust that will always tell you the truth, or most often tell you the truth. We can't ignore our illness anymore. And we can't tell people in our lives that it's their fault or we don't have the right medication all the time. And those are all part of it. It's all part of it. It's who we choose to be in relationship with. It's how often we are able to take the medications if they help us. It's how often we're able to engage in therapeutic relationships. But overall, the work is internal. It's all about ourselves. It's all about really being responsible. What you see on the slide right now, the broken mirror, really just symbolizes the distorted self view. And it's when we're struggling with our mental illness. It affects our personal identity. It affects our feelings. Remember back a few slides when I said, wow, is everybody else weird? Is, the moon, is a full moon out, acting differently, fill in the blank? Well, when I said somebody's, not speaking to me nicely, or you're doing this, or I didn't get this done because of blah, 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 somebody else, or I did it, I don't know what happened. That's a broken mirror. When we're constantly looking outwardly and maneuvering every situation to make ourselves look or feel better, that's a broken mirror. And you don't have to have a mental illness diagnosis to have a broken mirror. It's never always all about everybody else. It's never, ever, always about everybody we're blaming. Sometimes it's about us not being willing to slow ourselves down and take responsibility. Today, my mirror still isn't perfect. Trust and believe. But I can trust myself more today than I ever have. Today, I can accept the parts of me that aren't healed, that aren't complete. And I can accept that I'm still on this journey and I still need to change and I still need to grow. But there's people in my life that I love very much for being there with me through all these years. Just please, if there's anything I'll leave you with, it's think about you more than you're thinking what's wrong with others. And I'm just going to leave it there for any questions or comments that want to come through.
Well, Don, this is Kathy, and I have to comment. Um, we have been together a very long time, and I have seen the changes and the courage and the struggles that you've gone through firsthand. And our relationship and your ability to, be honest and truthful. And I'm saying that because in the chats, there are some responses from people that are where you were 15, 20 years ago. And it's very, very painful. And, you didn't talk about the impact on your health, but that also is very, very profound. The stress from your disease. But if you could say some words of hope, you went out and you found yourself a therapist, the best. You did the research, the very best of the best. So could you kind of share a little bit To those that are just beginning this very hard journey, I mean, you've offered hope, you've role modeled that, but just some words of wisdom.
And
Of
I'm
course.
ask Caroline to stop the screen share so we can see Dawn better. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Lori. Thank you so much, Caroline. You know, when I started, I didn't know who to talk to or what type of therapist or where to go. So I started while I was in the hospital with a credentialed peer support that started talking to me. And one of the things she said initially, I was like, oh my God, my life is over. Everybody knows me as, pick yourself up, put your boots on, get going, you're a tough girl. And I was like, I can't do that. And so the peer that I worked with, she's like, Dawn, I'm not going to say everything, but she did tell me I was going to be okay. And she said, you may never be the same as you think you were, but you're going to be okay. But I think the most important thing is to talk to somebody else who has lived experience and find their anchor. Like, well, what did they go somewhere, and get evaluated? Is there, a medication that is helping them more than another one? Is there a peer support that is in the area that you could reach out? Look, the truth is that it's never going to be the same for anyone, no matter who you are. But I took one step at a time. Peer support, wrong diagnosis, wrong medication, fell back, came back. It's like a saw. The thing that the peer support told me that made the most sense to me, and I'm old school. I mean, I'm older school. And I remember the saws that had the handle and the up and down that you had to kind of go back and forth with. And she said, whenever you think, because I'm so frustrated, I was like, this system's broken and nobody's getting help and I'm getting all the wrong stuff. And what I remember is she said to me, it's going to be like those teeth on the saw. Sometimes you're at that pinnacle and you feel great. And sometimes something shifts or nothing shifts, but somebody says, and you just feel bad. So my advice is, one, be an advocate for yourself more than you're advocating for others. Two, find a credentialed peer or family support that's been through that specific training, that's been there and done that. Three, remember to be kind to yourself, but it's a journey. It's back and forth. And I think if you do those three things and carve out your own way, your own way to healing and hold yourself accountable, I think there will be movement. And it's slow. Trust and believe it's slow. Yeah.
Thank you, Dawn. Vashti, you have your hand up.
And just to reinforce, you are allowed to ask for a peer support specialist that shares your life experience. Just
I'm
because
sorry.
someone doesn't, just because someone, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can, but I didn't hear one part. It broke up. I'm sorry.
You're allowed to ask to work with a peer support specialist that shares your lived experience. Just because someone doesn't mean it won't still be a fit. But if it's not a fit, and you think your peer support specialist is going to take it personally if you ask for somebody else, that is their problem, not yours.
Woohoo!
Such a great point. Very good point. Thank you for saying that. So are there any other questions or comments? I wasn't able, yes?
So if no one else, I don't want to be a little piggy, but Don, you also, your second language is sign language. And so what really threw me in the early years was your astute observations of any movement that I made, my smiles, how I cocked my head, and then you knew all these things, right or wrong. So I think that was an added dimension to some of the challenges that you have and still do, is that that ability to read body language and make that assumption that it's correct.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So my daughter, who's 38, I'm sorry, 39. Every year she gets older. I don't know how that happens, but so she is profoundly deaf and we utilize sign language. And so for all these years, part of sign language is facial expression and body language. It tells the individual whether it's a question or a comment or, so that facial expression and body language is ingrained in her language, which is my secondary language. Here's the problem. I do read facial expression and body language really well, but in this last year, what I've learned is when I'm sick, that deceives me because I have that distorted point of view. Remember, my mind is not as healthy as it normally is when I'm full of anxiety or depression. And so somebody might be thinking, oh my gosh, I forgot to turn off the crock pot at home. I really hope it doesn't burn my stew. And so they're thinking and they're rolling their eyes and they're stressed out about their food when I'm speaking and they're rolling their eyes and I'm like, oh, there they go. See, I see you with your attitude, And so sometimes our brains lie to us. And one of the worst parts about facial expression and body language, especially people that have been doing it for as long as I have, is you're an expert at it. You already know you're great at reading facial expression and body language. What you don't know is when you're sick, you're lying to yourself. There's always somebody whose facial expression does not match what they're thinking or feeling. Like me with my 11. I could be the happiest person in the world, but I've got these 2 lines here on my forehead that make people think I'm really angry. It's deception. And if we base our thoughts and our feelings on what we see all the time, a majority of that time, we're just going to be flat out wrong.
Dawn, this is Susie, and I cried during your presentation, and I thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Susie, thank you so much for saying that. That's why I do it. I do it because we are so vulnerable, all of us, and we're in this together and we all have a story. So thank you for sharing that.
So I'm seeing in the chat some comments about people that are neurodivergent. Would you guys like to comment or ask Dawn a question? I have trouble bringing, oh, here it is. Even without ASL training, hypervigilance around microaggression is very normal trauma response. It gets me in trouble too. So I think that kind of leads into a question I think all of us have had to deal with, and that is the stigma and the discrimination we have faced when we're in the system, when we have a diagnosis, and especially those of us that work in the system as a peer. And it's so difficult to discern when is it stigma and when are we just projecting, that. And it's very, very difficult. It's very painful.
Yeah, and I love talking about this because what a lot of people don't realize is before you could recognize stigma from other individuals, you have had to stigmatize yourself. So let me say that again. Before you recognize stigma from others, you have had to stigmatize yourself. So, and how we do that is by thinking those thoughts internally. See, so there is a bridge between being able to identify stigma coming at you and realizing that we often have stigmatized ourselves. Like in the beginning, when I talked about how, when I went to the hospital and I, had a breakdown, I didn't even know that all my life I had been dealing with anxiety and depression, but there was no way coming up in a full-blooded Italian family in the inner city of Detroit that I was ever going to recognize that I had a mental illness. That would just be like, no way, I'm not, I'm strong, And so, do you see how I've stigmatized myself early on? I put the stigma of mental illness bumped up against my cultural beliefs and my family beliefs and said, no way, that's not happening to me. That's not who I am. That's, especially when everybody else around me in my world at that time was angry and Italian, So, I mean, they'd come out of the Rocky movie being like, and so here's the most important thing about stigma is that most often it's born out of ignorance or acceptance. And this is what I mean. Ignorance, I don't know better. I don't know really the depth of mental illness, or I don't know what that means for my loved one or myself, or I just don't know. I'm not familiar with it. Or I accept. Who's that? Susie. All right, we got another Italian lady here. But, or I'm accepting the rhetoric because I know it's acceptable in my circles or in my culture. My father, when he was told, when I was in early middle school, he was told by a professional that I needed help to deal with my anxiety. You know what he said? No daughter of mine has a hole in her head. That's what he said with his hand, the Italian hand, no daughter of mine. So the truth is that there's stigma because it's accepted where that individual lives, or there's stigma because I don't know. What we can do is one, recognize self-stigma and teach ourselves about how we're stigmatizing ourselves, and two, educate those that are willing to learn. But we're not able to actually change anything, meaning anyone, past our own skin. We can only control what occurs within ourselves and where our skin is. Hey, there's a saying, and I know Deb Jorgensen can chime in on this, for people who have gone through substance use recovery. There's a saying, I used to work in a substance use residential center for women, and they used to say, if you spot it, you got it. So
Yep.
that's what I mean. That's what I mean, right, Deb, about that self-stigma. If I can spot stigma coming at me, that means I have stigmatized myself. I recognize it. Did I say that right, Deb?
I believe you did. And it is a hard thing to learn. My therapist taught me to put my hand out like I want something to stop with my hand up and think, is it true for me? Is this true for me? And because I'm just taking it in with the stigmatization that I have not embraced, but absorbed.
Yeah, that's a good word. Let me ask anybody, you could come off mute, or did this talk help? And if it did, in what way?
I think that you very much humanized the experience of being ill with our mental illness. I think that you did a fantastic job of humanizing it and explaining it in a way others can understand. So, fantastic job done.
Thank you.
This is definitely a talk that I wish I'd had access to, 7, 10 years ago. This is the sort of language that I wish had been around me growing up. And, that I wish, sooner would always be nicer, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
I think that when you said people telling me how to fix me, that's something that's been going on like for many decades with me. And it has probably, and I just kind of realized it while you were talking, I'm sorry. It's probably a part of the reason why I'm so resistant to going into therapy, because that's what I need in my life. Another person to tell me how to fix me, right? So, but it's funny, not funny, haha, but it's funny that you said that, because I've got an appointment coming up on the 6th for some therapy, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll have to be a little bit more open-minded. And the people that have been telling me how to fix me haven't been the professionals. It's probably time that I listen to one of those. Yeah.
I love that, Roy. I love that because it's so true. But I love that you're getting back out there. Good luck.
Dawn, I think that you reached everybody, struck a chord with everybody here, and the vulnerability and the openness. And I think that normalizing, and I don't like using the word normal or normalizing, but it's okay not to be okay, is a factor. And when you talk about stigmatizing and self-stigmatizing, I remembered a client I had years ago who was diagnosed later in life with bipolar, and had at when they were, anyway, what I guess to the point is, this person said, I don't want to take the medication that's being prescribed to me, because if I do, I'm admitting to myself that I have this illness.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a difficult spot to be. And I know where in the chat, Vashti said, I accept you as you are. Can coexist with I don't believe you. I can change.
Very good. Very good. How much more time do we have for this discussion? Are we almost there?
Oh, no, we've got 15 more minutes,
Okay.
20 minutes.
So I wanted to, one of the things that I've always envisioned, Lori, after this presentation is not only like a, time where people to share their thoughts, but where I could ask some questions that people can put in the chat. So one of the things that I was wondering is, Mental Health Monday is such an important vehicle to use to create change. And so stigmatization, if somebody's really good at saying that big word, um, if somebody would type that out in the chat. And here's my question. How many of you, I see we got like 26 people on the thing. Thank you. Somehow I knew it was you, girl. I knew you were going to be able to put that in there. How many of you are familiar with that? So if you could just put like a thumbs up in the chat. I was hoping for like actual be able to count numbers in the chat so that the peer for Mental Health Monday, they could actually say, oh, Dawn asked this question on self-stigmatization. Okay, Vashti, I'm going to ask you to come off mute in a minute and say that for me. Okay, so not familiar or thumbs up familiar in the chat.
So you
Let's
want
get
that
the
in
chat
chat,
popping.
not on the screen where you can.
Correct. In
Okay.
chat. Yep. Okay, so we have, 2 people so far, 3. Okay, we're getting there.
You've got 4 on Vashti's comment
Oh,
too.
okay, yeah. Thank you. Oh gosh, Deb, thank you. I didn't see that little 4 there. I think I need new glasses too. Okay.
Next time, reach out and we can set it up as a poll so it pops up on people's screens.
Okay. Let me just see. Okay. Just looking. Okay. So how many do we have so far? Because there was 26 people here. Do we have close to 26 represented in that question?
I think we've got 11 responses.
Okay, guys, do you guys mind? We're not tracking your names, just, okay, so Lillian, can we put a thumbs up in there for her? I saw all her thumbs up on her screen. Okay. So thank you, thank you. Thanks, everyone. This is just gonna help me working with Kathy and Laurie in the future of maybe some projects that we can do. Because that's kind of what we do, right? We ask each other, we learn, oh, where's a gap in our system, you know? The gap is, a lot of people don't understand self stigma. They don't understand that that's a precursor to everything else. And so, to me, when we educate ourselves, we grow. And so, all right, it looks like we probably got close to most people responding. So, thank you so much. Any other, Kathy, Lori, anything else that you'd like me to cover, or do you have other stuff on your agenda?
I would just like to, I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so you saw the discrimination and stigma that I faced, really rough situations at the department. Where in one situation there were some people writing threatening notes to the CEOs of the plans and to whatever, and it was felt that I was doing that, and it became a big thing. Don was hauled in and interrogated and whatever, but I didn't even know what was going on. I was put on leave and didn't even know what was going on, but it was assumed that it had to be me because I was the only peer there. I mean, it just was mind-boggling that this could happen. And then they found out, the police were called in, they found out who actually wrote the letters. The person was walked out, but it was never clarified that I hadn't done that. So that stigma followed me with people that didn't know. And so these kinds of situations, you face them, most of us, Deb, that have worked in, in the government, we're if something happens, that's where they're, and that's not just self-stigma. That is where the jaundice eye searches. They're the work point.
Right. Right. And I want to clarify because a lot of people think what I say is everything starts with self-stigma. What I'm really trying to say is that your recognition of stigma that occurs back towards you is you're only able to really understand the depth and the width of that type of stigma if you have experienced first that self stigma, because we don't really know. Now, in your situation, it was really interesting because you're right. I was there with you almost all week, every week. And it was bizarre because it was almost a culture mindset. And this is a really high level, she had very high level position, and all the other leaders kind of, it was almost like an accepted point of view. Well, it's got to be that one because she's the one that's a peer. And so what do? She stepped through that whole process, the only way that she could. But that is stigma. That is the definition of stigma is, oh, this person has mental illness, so they must be responsible for. and it must be their fault or whatever. And that is where we break down those cultural beliefs. Like I was talking about my dad being full-blooded Italian, and saying, there's kind of a culture in Italian families where, and maybe not so much anymore, but pretty much that, they don't believe in therapy, there's nothing wrong with you. And so these type of situations, cultural beliefs, whether it be professionally or family or whatever, we have to begin to identify and say, which you did a whole anti-stigma campaign back then, but the people, see, the answer isn't with, it's with education, but it really lies in the people.
Well,
Are
for
they
me, it was the peer support, you and Deb supporting me that I'm okay.
Mhm.
I didn't internalize that stigma, and I think that's where you're talking about, is was able to have the strength through peer support to not buy into the negativity about me at that time.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And that's certainly part of it. And I think the other part of it is to know that we can do our part in educating and preparing information and getting out there and speaking. But the real answer is in those individuals that get that education, and what do they do with it? We can only go so far, with our education. And hopefully, there's 10 people there. Hopefully, one of them walks away with, a better understanding and a change.
Well, it did, and we did change the department and access. There was a huge change in
Mhm.
acceptance of peers and family members, but it was a painful process.
Yeah, I know. I know you went through it. Ooh.
Go ahead, Vashti.
Uh,
Vashti has her hand up.
oh,
I think potentially another way to rephrase what Dawn's saying is that like we wouldn't be out here anticipating stigma and discrimination if we hadn't experienced it before. We wouldn't see it in all of those micro expression of like, oh, I might be judged. Like even here in this space, I find myself like, I'm not gonna lie, I've checked the attendee list of like, is there anyone here that I used to work with that I maybe shouldn't be sharing in front of? Because like I want to be open, I want to be a peer, and like as a peer support specialist, we walk this really tenuous line between client and clinician. And we want to be open with our peers, but then it can come back to bite us dealing with our coworkers.
mhm. Yep. Hmm. That's such a good point.
Libby, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think another perspective also is that with that internalized stigma, we have a lot of unlearning to do because of having those experiences. I think about kids with autism who see their stimming behaviors as just being a part of who they are until they're told that they're distracting or that they're wrong and that they have to control them. Right, instead of saying, "Oh, that's an expression of who you are." So they start seeing themselves as wrong or, not typical in some way, and then start that internalized stigma where they stop allowing themselves to be authentic and genuine, because they expect to have that pushback. So a lot of unlearning has to go into realizing that these things that other people might judge are not for us to judge about ourselves, and that it's okay for us to be those ways, um, in ways that, are safe for others around us.
I agree. I agree. Great points.
I'm wondering if anyone else would like to share their own experience with having a broken mirror and maybe how this discussion has helped you understand yourself or feel more comfortable sharing about yourself. I know Dawn's not the only one here that has this experience.
Well, I think I know for me that it's um it- it's it's difficult to really absorb any kind of feeling of accomplishment or when I am constantly I think it has a lot to do with an imposter syndrome as well, because if I leave my internal dialogue so stigmatizing and so self-depreciating, I I never feel that anything I really do is valid. And that's where this can play into things pretty deeply as well. And it takes getting, I mean, it takes self-honesty, and it takes having a tribe that will talk to you about that. Um and you know, really quite a bit of vigilance to not fall back into that kind of um like I I liken it to I want to treat myself as I would my own best friend. I would never say some of the things I say about myself or think about myself, that I would never do that to a friend, not a best one. And so reminding myself to treat myself like my own best friend, it it brings the mirror back instead of that shattered vision that you're describing so well, Dawn. Um, and that's something that has worked well for me.
Yeah, I really love that. You know, years ago, one of the peer supports in one of the groups that I was in said, you know, when we, are kind to ourselves, we actually can make ourselves remember that we love ourselves. And I was like, I don't understand. So she was like, have you ever like rubbed your friend's arm when they were feeling sad and been like, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that? Or, held, your friend's hand and said, I'm here, it's going to be okay. Well, why don't we do that to ourselves? And that is kind of your point. Well, I mean, it might be a little strange for me to be walking, in the grocery store, picking out strawberries and just start giving myself a hug. But, sometimes I don't care. I might do it. You never know with me. I might just do it. But I love your point, Deb, is that when we treat ourselves as well, if not better, than we treat those that we love, we can actually, well, I mean, there's whole chemicals that are released in that too that help us and help our brains, but we can actually reignite our feelings about ourselves. I love it. That's a great reminder for me because I forgot about that aspect.
Dawn, this
It's
is
cold in the
Sherry.
produce aisle, so you can hug yourself there.
Dawn, this is Sherry. I was thinking the whole time you were talking, my father was born and raised in Detroit. And but he was in the military, and we were raised in the military. And in the military, there was no such thing as mental illness. And I was thinking how I lived outside of the United States for 10 years of my, from age 6 to age 16. And how the only support that I really had was my family. But my family was led by my father, who said, there's no such thing. So that's like a double whammy. Like, unfortunately, it happens to anybody, I think, that is in the military, especially if you're outside the continental United States. But it's just another barrier, I think, that gets created. And I think, and for me, it led to a nervous breakdown and then a relapse and then 3 years of therapy before I am the way I am now.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Sherry, because yeah, very similar, stuff, keep it going, pick yourself up, keep on going, all of that. Yeah, I hear you. Um, Lori, Kathy, I'm not sure where you want me to go now.
Well, I would like to hear from the rest of the group where we could take this, because I think this is very important to our community and to supporting each other. We're facing a lot of changes, budget cuts, and more sadness. And how can we continue this kind of discussion? What would people like to see? What can we do to help? And I see Roy nodding his head.
Well, I was just thinking, along with a presentation of this sort, because it really opens up, it opened up so much for me. And I was like, should I share? Should I not? I have no idea. But it opened up so much for me that if I didn't have an appointment already set up coming up for November 6th, that I would probably want in this discussion, like maybe resources, or I'm not an employee anywhere, so I don't have an EAP, you know what I mean? But if I were an employee, maybe some of these organizations that are represented here would share their EAP and how to get some help, or maybe some resources in all of the rural areas in northern Arizona, where to get help for treatment of, like, whatever it brings up, whatever a discussion like this brings up, because there's a lot that was brought up for me. And I'm like, man, I really, if I'm still feeling this way about some of these things, I really need to go talk to somebody about it. So, but yeah, I just think that, what to do next? Like, what do I do now that I've had this discussion and all of these feelings or whatever have come up? What's next? And I think that would be a good thing to add into this at the end.
And this is Susie. I would love to see this as a presentation at our May Northern Summit. I still can't talk. I'm still so emotional. And I just feel like it would just be such a good thing at this time and place to have this.
And if
I
I could
second
add
that,
one more
Susie.
thing, I was going to say, if I could add one more thing, I have had the opportunities recently to go inside of the prisons at, well, probably 4 or 5 of them recently. And there's these RSAT programs, residential substance abuse treatment programs that are inside of prison now. They have yards with 200, 300, 400 incarcerated individuals that are in these programs. And I think a presentation like this into the prison could
Yes.
be so helpful to those men and women who are probably, months or maybe just a couple of years away from being released into society, and finding what it is that through this presentation, what it is that's caused them to have that broken mirror and start working on it before they get out. I think something, and I'm just saying there's there's ways of getting this presentation into the Department of Corrections, I think, from a reentry perspective standpoint, sort of thing.
Well, we can definitely do that through the diversity group, and I will definitely promote that. But it still leaves those that attend with a need to talk it through, and with limited resources now, I'd like maybe Lori to comment on that, because you got to get it on your ISP if you're in the system, and really push the system to provide that therapist. And yes, very much. So Lori, you want to?
Well, I think when we look at resources, look to your health plan and make sure that things are on your treatment plan. And if it's a specialty service that isn't covered by the health home, still look into getting it on your plan so that they can go outside of it for some of the folks with special needs. We're seeing that it isn't on the plan and therefore it doesn't happen and they don't know to ask. I think that the idea of going into the prison systems, and we work with George Nolan with New Freedom, and he's in the prisons. Yeah, we can certainly bring this forward and put him in contact with Dawn. Dawn, we often get a question when we have a presentation, is it available to be sent out to folks or not? The PowerPoint, and it's up to you.
No, I'm not sending it out right now, but I did put McReynolds. I just wanted to make sure I spelled my own last name right. For some weird reason, it didn't look right. I put my private email in the chat for everyone, if they want to reach out. But, Deb Jorgensen is on here too. And, there's a lot of ways that, we in our professional lives can support people too. I'm just using my private email address right now because this isn't part of my job, but I mean, anyway. And so what I really love is the interest in the story, and anybody can take PowerPoint slides and change them to represent your own story. Like Roy, if you know this population in prison, and you really know, what you've been through, you can make that your story, because all of us have a story. And, the key is the transparency of, not like, oh, where I've come from and where I've arrived at. The key is, that I'm here. I'm still in the muck, and you are too. And, it's going to be okay. We'll get through this thing together. So I think, I think part of the answer, and I'll do other presentations. You guys know I love doing that, but part of the answer is to have others share their story and create their own way of really speaking to those that need help, and finding that venue to share and equip. But as far as after, about resources, gosh, that's such a good point. And we're all, want to help. I just don't know, like, other than sharing like emails and, what Lori said, it's, I don't know if I would put any resources at the end of the presentation. I think, Roy, what I would do as like a speaker that shares this presentation, I would ask whoever I'm sharing it with, whatever group, to get resources prepared for after and let them be the expert in, because it's their audience. You know what I mean? So that might be a way to do it too.
No,
Okay,
that's a great point because you are, sharing it probably to geographical areas that you're not necessarily familiar with and you don't know what the resources are in that area. So yeah, I think, when you're before the presentation, asking the group to come up with some, and then during the presentation, maybe, hey, if anybody out there who's listening right now knows of some resources for the folks in here who are experiencing some sort of an event, because of this discussion, maybe add that into the chat.
Perfect. Great point.
we have time for one more comment, Vashti.
One of my favorite things to work with clients on, and it goes into what Dawn talked about with, recognizing and addressing stigma. I really like working with people on, recognizing executive dysfunction and like, no, you're not just being lazy. Your brain is doing something, and how to use Ask Jan and once you've figured out your own executive dysfunction. So that's something I plan on building regardless in the future, but you guys can arm wrestle with Cassandra over the order of my priority list.
All right, thank you. And if this has opened up emotional vulnerability for some of you, Dawn pointed out, talk to someone you trust. It's not just the resources, it's who is in your circle, who is your peer, who is your mentor, and pursue, the support that you have and expand it if needed. And Roy, glad to hear you've got an appointment and an open mind for it. And one of the things I want to emphasize that Dawn said is the broken mirror is experienced by everybody. You don't have to be a diagnosed person with mental illness. Everybody who's human experiences anxiety and different things. So with that, I'll turn it to Kathy to thank the speaker. And after that, I'll stop the recording and come up with announcements.
Thank you, Dawn. You are absolutely wonderful. Thank you.